My son tapped his wineglass during my birthday dinner, then announced to a table full of strangers that he and his wife would be moving into my apartment. I hadn't agreed, but everyone was already clinking glasses, smiling, filming. They thought they'd trapped me with politeness. They had no idea what I'd find in my husband's old filing cabinet that night. And they definitely didn't see what I was planning the very next morning. I turned 67 on a Thursday. The kind of quiet weekday that doesn't beg for fanfare but still deserves a little something. A toast, a slice of tiramisu, maybe a candle that wouldn't stay lit on the first try. That's all I wanted. Something simple, familiar. A moment to feel like I hadn't been forgotten. I wore my navy cardigan, the one with the pearl buttons and little snags on the sleeves from years of being too close to my sewing desk. It wasn't fancy, but it was me. I'd owned it longer than Marissa had known my son. I added a dab of my rose-scented perfume and twisted my wedding band once on my finger before heading out. It was still there, even though he wasn't. The bistro was one of those tucked-away places you only find if you're looking. Family-owned with checkered tablecloths and oil paintings of the Amalfi Coast on the walls. The kind of place that remembered your name and always asked if you wanted your usual table. I'd been there once with my late husband, back when we were newly retired and unsure how to fill our afternoons. He'd ordered something too spicy and spent the rest of the night fanning his tongue with a napkin, making me laugh until my ribs hurt. This time, it was Caleb who pulled out the chair for me, but not before Marissa kissed the air beside my cheek and handed me a glossy black gift bag. "For you," she said, her voice syrupy and her smile too white. "From both of us." The tissue paper was fluffed like a bakery display. Inside, a sleek silver designer pen engraved with my initials in small, neat cursive. And a card, not one with a handwritten message, no warm memories, no "to the best mom" or even a "love you." Just a printed note on thick cardstock with gilded corners that read, "Thank you for your generosity. It means the world to us." I blinked. What generosity? I didn't say it out loud. I smiled because that's what you do. At 67, you learn that some questions are better left to the silence between sips of water and polite laughter. "I thought it might be nice for journaling," Marissa said, tapping the pen. "You do that, right?" "I do. But that pen would never touch my pages." The table had been set for 6, Caleb and Marissa, 2 of their friends I didn't recognize, and a woman named Justine who used to work with Marissa in brand partnerships, whatever that meant. I tried to keep up with the introductions, but it was clear I wasn't the center of attention. I was the centerpiece, the token birthday mom, there to be honored, toasted, and quietly repositioned like a piece of furniture no one knew quite where to put anymore. Marissa ordered a drink called a lavender pear spritz and whispered to the waiter about less sugar, more ice. Caleb sat beside her, scrolling on his phone between forced smiles and the occasional hand squeeze over the table. I sat with my hands in my lap, pretending not to notice how far away the conversation felt. They were talking about new flooring options and registry duplicates and IVF updates with clinical detachment, like they were reading a grocery list of future plans. I nodded and hummed when appropriate, sipping my lukewarm coffee. I should have left then. I should have seen the storm clouds gathering behind their words, but I didn't. Because you don't expect to be ambushed on your birthday. Because you think love gives you a little immunity. Because you think your own child wouldn't set you up like this. But I was wrong. So instead, I sat there, quiet, grateful, trying not to seem too eager for anything, and smiled with the kind of practiced grace only women my age truly understand. And then, Caleb tapped his wine glass. Not for a toast to my health, not to share a memory from childhood, not to say thank you. Number. It was the kind of tap that changes everything. The chime of Caleb's wine glass tapping against the stem made the chatter at the table fall away like leaves in wind. One sharp note, enough to quiet the room, but not sharp enough to warn me. "I just want to say something," he began, rising to his feet with the forced confidence of someone who had practiced this in the mirror. My son has always had a voice that could sell sincerity. He used to read bedtime stories with the kind of conviction that made me believe dragons could be real. But that night, I didn't hear a story. I heard a script. "To my incredible mother," he said, lifting his glass. "Happy 67th to the strongest, kindest woman I know. And thank you, not just for tonight, but for the incredible gesture you made. You've given us more than we could ever ask for." Applause trickled around the table. Marissa squeezed my hand. I blinked. "Gesture," she beamed at me, eyes glittering with the performance of gratitude. "We're so lucky, especially with everything going on. The stress of IVF, the emotional toll. Your generosity means everything." I tried to pull my hand back, but she gripped it tighter, like I might float away if she let go. "We've decided," Caleb said, turning to address the whole room now, "that by fall we'll be moving into my mom's apartment." My spine stiffened. He smiled like a politician, practiced and smug. "It just makes sense. Mom has so much space she doesn't need anymore, and it'll give Marissa the calm environment she needs. She deserves to feel grounded during this journey. And Mom," he turned to me, "we're so grateful you agreed." My breath caught. Agreed? I looked around the table. No one seemed confused. No one looked at me for confirmation. They were all already nodding, sipping their drinks, clinking glasses again. I didn't... I started, but the words tangled behind my teeth. Marissa's phone was angled slightly toward me, recording. My face, my silence, my reaction. This was a rollout, not a conversation, a performance. "We're thinking September," Marissa added, already sliding into the logistics. "I'll be far enough along to nest, and we'll still have time to decorate the nursery before the holidays." Nursery. In my apartment. She leaned in with a smile, syrupy and saccharine. "Don't worry, Vivian. We'll keep your little balcony just the way you like it. It'll be your little nook." Little nook. My sanctuary, where I'd kept my succulents and wind chimes, where I'd once sipped tea with my husband during chemo, where I'd cried for 2 full weeks after his funeral. That was now a nook. The table murmured in appreciation, as if this were a beautiful story of generations living together, not a hijacking dressed in sentiment. I forced a smile. It was brittle, thin-lipped. I raised my glass just slightly. I couldn't tell you if it was habit, fear, or paralysis. Probably all three. Inside, my heart beat like a drum in a locked room. Outside, I looked like any aging woman flattered by her family's attention. They mistook my silence for agreement, but I wasn't silent because I accepted. I was silent because I knew if I spoke, I'd break something inside me, and I wasn't ready, not yet. So I nodded, not because I meant it, but because I'd just been made a guest at my own betrayal. I don't remember paying the bill. I don't remember saying goodbye. I just remember standing outside the bistro, the air thick with drizzle, and Marissa holding out her umbrella like an offering. "Let us drive you," Caleb said, his voice still smooth, still pretending none of it had been staged. "It's cold." So was I. I shook my head. "I need the walk." He frowned, but not with concern, with inconvenience. Marissa touched his arm and whispered something I didn't catch. I turned away before I saw their faces again. My heels clicked against the wet pavement, echoing off empty storefronts. The street lamps cast long, wavering shadows that danced over the sidewalk cracks. Somewhere down the block, a car alarm hiccuped once, then went quiet. I walked slowly, not because I wanted to, my feet already ached, but because I couldn't go home yet. Not to that apartment. Not to those walls. The drizzle soaked through my cardigan within minutes, and I let it. Let it drip down my back, slide under my collar, cling to my sleeves. It felt grounding. Real. Unlike the past 2 hours where nothing had belonged to me. Not the dinner, not the conversation, not even the apartment I still paid HOA fees for. As I neared the corner of my street, my pace slowed even more. That block always felt sacred. My husband and I used to call it the pause on our evening walks. We'd stop there and look up at the sky, even when it was cloudy, even when he was sick. Now I just stood there staring at the apartment building ahead, my building, my home. But the word home felt too generous. The lobby light flickered through the fogged-up windows. I pictured my balcony, my little balcony, as Marissa called it, where I'd grown tomatoes in the spring and watched thunderstorms in the fall. The place where I'd poured a glass of wine the day Caleb called to say he was proposing. I remembered repainting the walls after my husband died. Not white, not beige, a soft ocean gray he would have hated. But it made the apartment mine again. Or so I thought. I climbed the stairs slowly. The elevator's hum behind me felt too mechanical, too impersonal. When I opened the door, the smell of lavender from the reed diffuser greeted me. Familiar, but wrong. I set my purse on the hall table and stood in the doorway of the living room, dripping rain onto the hardwood floors. My husband's photo stared at me from the mantel. He was holding a coffee mug with a chip in the rim, his smile faint, distracted. That photo had always been my favorite. He never liked posed ones. Tonight, though, he looked like a warning. Marissa's voice rang in my ears again. "It'll be your little nook." As if my entire life had been downsized into a decorative corner. I walked through each room, slowly. Touching things, not to tidy, not to fix, just to feel what was still mine. The recliner we bought after his diagnosis, when the chemo left him too tired for the couch. The bookshelf I'd arranged alphabetically after he passed, trying to force order where there was none. The jade plant that refused to die, no matter how often I forgot to water it. I stepped into the bedroom, our bedroom, and suddenly the air shifted, heavy, still. I sat on the edge of the bed, soaking the comforter without caring, and stared at the closet door. Marissa's voice again. "Before you get tired of climbing stairs." As if I were some antique she was gently preparing to box up. I swallowed hard. My chest ached, not with grief, but with clarity. They had planned this, rehearsed it, delivered it like a gift, as if I should be honored to hand over the only place I still felt whole. I lay back on the bed, fully clothed and rain-soaked, and stared at the ceiling. The plaster crack in the corner looked like a fault line. For the first time in years, I didn't feel safe in my own home. And it wasn't because someone had broken in. It was because someone I loved had been quietly chiseling away at my walls until he thought he could just walk in and take them. I didn't sleep that night. Not a doze. Not even the half-sleep where dreams blur into ceiling shadows. I just lay there, staring at the crack in the plaster until sunrise painted it gold like a cruel joke. At 6:14 a.m., I got up and made coffee I didn't want, just to hear something familiar, the sputter and steam of the old percolator filling the silence. I stood in the kitchen barefoot, the floor cold beneath me, watching the sun edge over the windowsill like a reluctant witness. Marissa had said it like a compliment. "You've been so generous, Vivian." But generous people give. I hadn't given anything. I hadn't even agreed. So why did it feel like the papers had already been signed? That thought chilled me deeper than the rain ever could. I wrapped my cardigan tighter and walked to the hallway closet, the one I hadn't opened in years. Not really. It still smelled like lemon polish and dust. Inside was a short filing cabinet, beige, dented at the base from where Caleb once knocked it over helping us move in. Back then, he'd apologized 3 times, brought me tulips the next day. Now I wondered if he even remembered. The cabinet held decades. Tax returns, warranty slips for appliances we no longer owned, faded documents from our first home. Beneath them all, my husband's folder, the thickest one. I sat on the living room rug and opened it like an old diary, each page a memory I hadn't asked to revisit. There were insurance policies, handwritten checklists from the months he'd been sick, even a sticky note in his handwriting that just said, "Ask Dr. Klein about the lung thing." And then, near the bottom, I found it. A form with Caleb's name typed neatly in the middle. Durable power of attorney, dated 5 years ago, signed by me. I stared at the signature, my own handwriting, slanted, a little shaky. It was from the week after my gallbladder surgery, when I was still floating from anesthesia and painkillers. Caleb had been the one who brought me soup and helped manage my prescriptions. I remembered him setting papers on my nightstand. "Just a few forms," he'd said. "For emergencies, in case anything ever happens." I signed because I trusted him, because mothers sign. We trust our children to carry our names gently. But now that signature felt like a loaded gun, and I had no idea whose finger was on the trigger. I called my lawyer before I could second-guess it. Annette. She'd handled our estate back when my husband passed. Sharp eyes, no fluff. She answered on the second ring. "Vivian?" "I found something," I said, my voice lower than I expected. "A power of attorney. From years ago. Caleb's name is on it." There was a pause. Not surprised, just tense. "Do you remember revoking it?" she asked. "No." "Then it's likely still valid. Send me a photo." I did. My hands shook while holding the phone, but I got the picture. Within minutes, she called back. "It doesn't give him ownership," she said, "but it gives him access. If he wanted to, and if you weren't alert, if you were confused or sick, he could act on your behalf." "But I'm not confused," I said. "No," she agreed, voice firm. "You're not. But this kind of power isn't always about what's true. It's about what someone can claim is true." She let the words settle before continuing. "He could take out paperwork saying you're showing signs of decline. Subtle signs. Forgetting things. Acting impulsively. If a doctor signs off, even loosely, he could start moving pieces without your full consent. Banks don't question power of attorney the way they should." I couldn't speak. The rug under me felt like it was tilting. "He can't take the apartment," she added. "Not without a signature, but he can make life difficult. Tie things up, freeze accounts, challenge your decisions." I closed my eyes. "So I'm not imagining it." "No," she said gently. "You're not. You're waking up to it." After we hung up, I sat there a long time with the file open beside me. My name, my husband's, Caleb's, ink binding us all together in ways I never thought to question. A form I signed to protect myself had become a blueprint for erasure. Not overnight, not with force, but slowly, neatly, legally. And if I didn't act soon, I'd wake up one day and find that I'd been folded out of my own life, one polite document at a time. I hadn't even had the chance to process what Annette told me. My thoughts were still scattered across the living room floor, alongside manila folders and brittle paper edges, when my phone buzzed. Marissa. She'd tagged me in something. I tapped the screen. A story. Soft instrumental music in the background. Ukulele or something equally manipulative. The video panned slowly across a room I knew intimately. My living room, my sofa, my curtains, drawn open just enough to let in the kind of filtered light people use for newborn photo shoots. "Designing our forever space," the caption read. "Thank you, Vivian." I sat perfectly still. Not frozen, just deliberately still, the way you are when you're afraid to breathe because you might explode. They had keys. Of course they did. I'd given Caleb a spare years ago, back when he was still the kind of son who called before stopping by. He must have let himself in while I was at the doctor's last week, or maybe when I was volunteering at the center. I couldn't remember. That fact terrified me more than anything else. They'd gone inside, filmed it, edited it, posted it, without telling me, like it was theirs. I opened my email out of reflex, hands moving faster than my thoughts, and there it was. Subject, transition plan from Caleb Wilton. Time 7:08 a.m. It was a PDF polished. Branded even with bullet points and headers like this was a pitch deck for investors. Phase 1, entry prep. Phase 2, personal item removal timeline. Suggested dates for handoff to retirement consultant. There was even a note about HOA preferences and potential pet restrictions. Caleb had included a line about respecting mom's space, while also suggesting a timeline for when I might want to begin exploring independent living options more aligned with my phase of life. My phase of life. He made it sound like I was a broken lease. A glitch in a long-term strategy. He wanted me out by mid-October. Marissa had added a comment bubble to the section about personal item removal. Maybe she can donate some of the old stuff? There's a Goodwill on 4th. We'll help her sort. I stared at the screen so long I forgot to blink. They had planned every detail. They had taken my silence as consent, and now they were repackaging it as love. My mouth went dry, but I printed the email. Every page. The story screenshots, too. I saved them to a flash drive, added them to the folder labeled legal, now resting inside the lockbox under my bed. The worst part wasn't the post. It wasn't even the tone of the email, which read like a memo from a well-meaning villain. It was the realization that they didn't expect me to fight. They thought I'd go quietly, that I'd be too tired, too soft, too overwhelmed to resist. They mistook my politeness for permission, and that was their mistake. The moment I realized they'd written me out of my own life, something in me calcified. It wasn't rage, not the kind that boils and spills. It was colder than that, sharper, like glass settling into place. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just stood at the printer while the pages of Caleb's transition plan slid out one by one and made a decision I never thought I'd make. I would not defend my space. I would erase their assumption of it. That afternoon, I poured a fresh cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the curtains open, letting the light flood the room. I wanted to see everything. My chair, my teapot, the chipped tile in the corner I'd always meant to fix. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in nearly 7 years. Joanne Matthews Realty, a voice answered, tired but still crisp. It's Vivian, I said. There was a pause, then a warm chuckle. Vivian Fields, as I live and breathe. Lord, how long's it been? Too long. Well, you calling to finally sell that sewing machine I never won the bet on? No, I said. I'm calling because I want the apartment sold. Another pause. Pardon? Immediately, I said. Quietly, off-market, no signs, no open houses, just cash buyers. Someone who won't ask too many questions. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, all right, I can do that. What happened? Nothing I'm ready to say out loud, but I can have photos to you by tonight. You still got that file cabinet full of receipts and old mortgage docs? Yes. Good. Pull it. I'll bring over paperwork tomorrow. And Vivian, yes? You sound different. I am. That evening, I moved like a woman possessed, but calm, focused. I took photos of the apartment, not as memories, but as assets, angles, lighting. I photographed my husband's old armchair, the mantel, even the jade plant. I made sure to catch the parts that said, well cared for, without saying lived in. I vacuumed, tidied, boxed up a few personal items. Nothing noticeable. Not yet. Caleb and Marissa were still watching, still assuming. The living room remained intact, the photo of my husband still on the mantel. But the drawers held only what I needed now: documents, flash drives, keys. Everything else I had already started to pack away mentally. Joanne arrived the next day just before noon, wearing the same peacoat she'd worn when she helped us find this place 30 years ago. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a folder with clipped forms and a pen that worked on the first click. You're serious, she said quietly as I signed the first page. Yes. Cash buyer? Word of mouth only. I'll keep it tight. I know you will. She paused, then added, we can list it under the radar. No digital footprint. It'll cost you a little. Lower offer, no bidding war. I don't want noise, I said. I want distance. She nodded once. I'll find the right match. We sat in silence for a moment before she reached for her bag. Joanne? I said, just as she stood. Yeah? Thank you for not asking why. She smiled. Some stories don't need to be told right away. But if you ever decide to, I'll bring wine. That night, I lit a candle and sat by the window with my journal. I didn't write a letter to Caleb. I didn't write a farewell to the apartment. I wrote a list of what was mine, what I had built, what I had kept alive, what I would take with me. My name was at the top, and for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like a footnote. I used to believe that preparing for the worst meant you were inviting it. But after what I'd seen, after the emails, the staged video, the look in Marissa's eyes when she handed me that umbrella like a trophy, I understood something that changed me. Sometimes the worst doesn't knock. It already has a key. So I stopped waiting. I began building my case, not for a courtroom but for myself, for the moment when they'd try to rewrite the truth and claim I was too confused to correct it. The first thing I did was request my medical records. Every checkup, every eye exam, every follow-up after the surgery 5 years ago. The same surgery that left me groggy enough to sign the power of attorney form Caleb had slipped into the pile of insurance paperwork. I asked the receptionist at my doctor's office for them all. "Just making sure everything's in order for estate planning," I said, smiling warmly as if nothing was wrong. She nodded, printed the release forms, and I kept my hands steady as I signed. "Would you like them digitally or by mail?" "Both," I said. That night, I set up a new folder on my laptop. Vivian, Competency Archive. Then I recorded myself journaling. Nothing dramatic. Just me, in my cardigan, sipping chamomile tea at the dining table, speaking out loud about my finances, my medication schedule, the list of things I needed to do before the apartment sold. I narrated my choices with clarity, time-stamped, dated, saved to cloud storage. I made another folder, backups. Every text message Caleb had sent, every story post Marissa had made, screenshots of her Instagram captions, fresh start in Vivian's unit, tagged with paint swatches and smiling emoji. Even her Pinterest board had a name that made my stomach tighten, Vivian's Layout Reimagined. They had made a project out of me, so I turned their project into evidence. I took screenshots. I printed them. I used an old scanner from the sewing room to digitize every letter, every receipt, every HOA notification in my name. I created timelines, cross-referencing social posts with message timestamps, matching Marissa's public declarations to Caleb's private emails. I labeled everything with neutral terms: correspondence A, interior reference B, consent, claim C. Each document, each clip, each file was a brick in a wall I was building around my name, and I wasn't alone. Joanne had already reached out to 2 buyers. One, a retired pilot who wanted a city pad close to his daughter, cash, discreet. The kind of buyer who didn't care about nursery colors or retirement timelines, just square footage and sunlight. Annette, my lawyer, called to tell me the paperwork to revoke Caleb's power of attorney was ready. All I had to do was come in and sign. We agreed I'd do it after the inspection, just in case Caleb had contacts at the bank or HOA who might flag a transfer too early. Everything was in motion. Every day I woke up a little earlier, ate a little better, slept with a little more ease, though never fully, not yet. I stopped taking the melatonin. I needed my mind clear. I even made decoy grocery lists in cursive and tucked them into my journal, just in case. They weren't just trying to take my apartment. They were trying to take my credibility. And if they ever tried to say I was unstable, erratic, or forgetful, I'd have a stack of dated files and clear-headed footage that said otherwise. I wasn't paranoid. I was proving I could still tell the difference between a loving gesture and a legal setup. And every time I clicked Save As, I felt a little more like myself, a little less like a piece in their story, a little more like the author of my own. The sale closed on a Wednesday. It was quiet, exactly how I wanted it. No agents in shiny shoes walking strangers through my kitchen. No open house scent of fake cookies. Just a firm handshake from Joanne and a final document emailed at 8:36 a.m. that read, "Funds transferred. Deed recorded. Property no longer in your name." I stared at that line for a long time. It felt less like a transaction and more like an exhale. The apartment that had been mine for 32 years, the one I decorated with my husband, mourned him in, fought to reclaim piece by piece, was now someone else's. And I was free, not light, not giddy, just free. Like a rope had finally loosened around my chest. At 9:12 a.m., I heard the buzz at the front gate. They were right on time. I watched through the peephole as Caleb stood there, holding 2 paper cups from that overpriced cafe he always took Marissa to on Sundays. His blazer was wrinkled. His smile was tight. Behind him, Marissa beamed like someone who thought they were moments away from receiving a gift. I opened the door just enough to let them in. I had decided not to stage anything. No dramatic entrance, no final warnings, just the truth, clean and documented. They stepped inside, oblivious to the absence of my plants by the window. Marissa gave me the coffee, hazelnut my usual, and chirped, "Thought we could all chat about the next steps. The inspector's coming next week and we figured we'd start measuring for—" I raised a hand and handed her a bright blue envelope. Caleb frowned. "What's this?" I looked directly at him. A revocation of power of attorney, effective immediately, and a cease and desist, prepared by my lawyer, regarding your use of my name, my property, and my health in any future planning. Marissa blinked. "Vivian, what is this about? You walked through my home uninvited, filmed it, planned to replace me in it, all while calling it love." Caleb's voice dropped an octave. "Mom, this isn't necessary." "Yes," I said, "it is." He opened the envelope and flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing deeper with each line. Marissa looked from the paperwork to me like a child caught shoplifting. "But we thought you were on board." "No," I said. "You hoped I'd stay quiet long enough for it to become true." Caleb stepped forward, tone sharpening. "You're overreacting. This is going to cause real damage." I tilted my head. "To what exactly?" "Your schedule?" He held up the envelope like it offended him. "This won't hold up if it comes to legal action." I didn't flinch. "Try me." Marissa crossed her arms. "You're choosing a fight over family?" "No," I said. "I'm choosing boundaries over betrayal." The silence that followed was dense. Caleb's shoulders rose and fell with that tight breath he always took before a lecture. But this time, I didn't wait. "I won't let you use my kindness as leverage. I won't let you claim parts of me I never offered. This isn't a negotiation. This is a line." Marissa opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes flicked toward the corner of the room, probably calculating what furniture they could still get access to. I nodded toward the door. "You should go." Caleb stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. Maybe he didn't. That was fine. I had just remembered who I was. He hesitated, then turned sharply on his heel, the coffee still in his hand. Marissa followed, her heels clicking too fast on the floor she'd once said needed refinishing. They didn't slam the door, but they didn't say goodbye either. And as it shut behind them, I slid the deadbolt into place with a click that sounded for the first time like peace. They didn't come back the next day. They didn't call either. Instead, they posted. It started with Caleb, on that account he rarely used, the one where he only ever shared quotes from business books or throwback photos of college friends. But this time it was different. Just a plain black background and a Bible verse, "Honor thy father and thy mother." No caption, just that. Then came Marissa, a selfie angled perfectly, makeup slightly smudged, eyes red, captioned, "Sometimes mothers choose walls over family. That's their right. But it still hurts." The photo was taken from inside their car. I recognized the faint glow of the dashboard. I also recognized the exact look in her eyes, rehearsed grief, just enough vulnerability to invite sympathy, not so much that it raised suspicion. Within an hour, her post had over 400 likes, dozens of comments, sending love. Can't believe some people can be so heartless. You're going to be such amazing parents. Don't let the negativity win. One even said, boomers really be out here treating their kids like enemies. I stared at the screen, the heat pooling behind my eyes, not from shame, not even hurt, from disbelief. They weren't fighting back. They were rewriting the story. And the worst part, people believed it. Later that evening, a friend from church texted me, "Hey Viv, saw something online, are you okay?" Then another, "Is it true you kicked them out when they were trying to start a family?" And then the voice I hadn't expected, my sister. She called, voice clipped. "Vivian, what are you doing?" I let out a dry laugh. "Taking back what's mine." "Their family." "They were," I said, "until they started treating me like an address instead of a person." There was silence, then a sigh. "This isn't like you." "No," I said softly. "It's not, but maybe that was the problem." After the call, I poured a glass of water and sat in the armchair beside the window, the one I hadn't packed up yet. I held my phone loosely in my hand, the screen still glowing with notifications. And then a single message came through that felt like a lifeline tossed across a rising tide. "Lucy, Aunt Viv, I saw what they were doing. You're not crazy. You're not alone. If you need anything, legal eyes, even just to vent, I'm here. Love you. Lucy, my goddaughter, 27, a junior paralegal at a mid-sized firm downtown, sharp as a tack. She had never liked Marissa. Said once after brunch that Marissa reminded her of a woman who'd practiced her apology in a mirror but never meant it. I wrote back just 2 words. "Thank you." Because that was all I could say without falling apart. Because Lucy's message reminded me that while people will fall for stories, not everyone does. Some people still look for the truth, and some, like me, are done apologizing for surviving it. The cottage sat 3 hours south of the city, tucked between a ridge of pine trees and a narrow lake that never made it onto postcards. The road that led to it was barely paved, and my cell service blinked out a full 20 minutes before I arrived. Perfect. Joanne had found it through one of her old contacts. A private listing, no online photos, no bidding war. Just a widower looking to downsize, and a woman looking to disappear with grace. I wired the deposit the same day the apartment closed. It cleared in 48 hours. No mortgage, no shared title, just my name, sharp and solitary, on the deed. When I stepped inside for the first time, the house smelled like cedar and quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, just untouched, unclaimed. I stood in the threshold, suitcase by my feet, and listened to it breathe. It was smaller than the apartment, of course. 2 bedrooms, a galley kitchen, an old wood stove with rust creeping along its base. The walls were painted a soft, pale yellow, faded in some spots, but warm, lived in. And now, mine. I didn't unpack right away. I didn't set up shelves or hang pictures. Instead, I made tea, mint from a box I'd brought in a cloth tote, and stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching the steam rise. No buzz of the city, no neighbors shouting through thin walls, no schedule, no performance, just me, alive. Not as a mother, not as a wife, not as an obstacle someone was trying to remove, just a person. The next morning, I met my new neighbor. Claire was 62, recently divorced, and ran a tiny soap-making business out of her garage. She had wiry gray hair pulled into a bun and hands that looked like they'd built things, real things. She knocked with a jar of homemade balm and said, "Welcome to the neighborhood. Word is you're running from something. Don't worry. We all are." I liked her instantly. Within a week, I'd joined the local co-op. Within 2, I'd planted thyme and mint in a raised garden bed behind the cottage. By the end of the month, I had memorized the grocery clerk's name, the way the sun hit the lake around 6 p.m., and the sound of the wind chimes I'd hung from an old pine hook on the porch. Annette helped me set up a trust, a fund for single, elderly women displaced by financial abuse. I used part of the sale proceeds to start it and named it after my husband. He would have liked that. He always believed people deserved a second wind. "No loopholes?" I asked. "None," Annette said. "Caleb and Marissa are legally locked out of everything." I nodded. The relief didn't come all at once. It arrived in pieces. In the first uninterrupted night of sleep I'd had in months. In the way my shoulders dropped when I sat by the fireplace without checking my phone. In the soft sound of my own breath when I realized I wasn't being watched anymore. There were still moments that hurt. A comment I'd stumble across online. A forwarded email from an old friend too polite to say they believed Marissa's story. A pang of guilt when I saw a baby photo and wondered what kind of grandmother I might have been if love had come without strings. But none of those moments lasted. They floated in and drifted out, like pine smoke from the chimney, like memory, like grief doing what it was supposed to do. Pass through. One evening, after dinner with Claire and 2 other women from book club, We sat on the porch, sipping herbal tea. We laughed about everything and nothing, about soap scents, ex-husbands, and how none of us really understood TikTok. The breeze picked up. My wind chimes sang low and clear, and I realized as the laughter faded into a comfortable hush that I had done it. I had not just escaped. I had arrived. The letter arrived 3 weeks after I'd moved in. No return address. Just my name, Vivian Fields, typed neatly on the envelope, like a business memo. Inside was a folded piece of thick white cardstock, a sonogram photo, framed, and a note. "Can we start over? A and D." I stared at it for a long time, not because I believed it was real, because I recognized it. The image was stock, a sample from one of those pregnancy apps Marissa used to share in her Pinterest boards. She had posted it months ago, back when the baby journey was still a curated hashtag and not a weapon. They'd printed it, framed it, mailed it like a peace offering. It didn't make me angry. It made me tired. I set it on the counter unopened again. 2 days later, the email came. Subject line, dinner, message body. "We'll be in your area this weekend. Let's just talk. No pressure, just family. No pressure." That was what they always said before they tried to twist my silence into consent. Saturday evening came too quickly. The lake was still. The pine branches barely moved. Around 6:40 p.m., headlights appeared at the end of the gravel path. A silver SUV. I recognized the silhouette of Caleb in the driver's seat, and Marissa's frame beside him. Hair too neat for a casual drop-in. She was holding something. Flowers. Probably store-bought. Too many, too white. They got out slowly, dressed as if they were walking into a Hallmark scene. Caleb in his old navy blazer, Marissa in nude heels that didn't match the gravel. He held a bottle of wine. She held the flowers like a prop. I didn't turn on the porch light. I stood behind the curtain just far enough to watch, just close enough to feel nothing. They walked up the path, hesitating at the last step. Caleb knocked first. Polite at first, then again, louder. "Mom?" I didn't move. "We just want to talk," he said. I could hear the strain in his voice now, the performance cracking. Ashley's voice followed, trembling in practiced pitch. "You're shutting out your grandchild," she said. "Is that what you want?" I didn't respond. I didn't even blink. They waited 22 minutes. I counted. Then quietly they set the flowers down on the porch step. Caleb placed the bottle beside them. The label faced the door. Forgiveness, Pinot Noir. I watched as they walked back to the SUV. No yelling, no threats. Just the faint sound of their tires crunching the gravel as they drove away. I left the flowers until morning. Then I threw them in the compost bin. I poured the wine down the sink. That night, I opened my phone and read the last message Caleb ever sent me. "You win. Hope it was worth losing your family." I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because the door had never been closed out of cruelty. It was closed because I had finally learned how to protect what was left of me. And that was something no one, no son, no performance, no framed lie, would ever touch again. It didn't end with fireworks. No final phone call. No apology letter. No last-ditch confession where someone cried and said they'd learned their lesson. It ended in silence, which I realized was the most honest sound they'd ever given me. 3 weeks after Caleb and Marissa left the wine on my porch, I got a call from Annette. "The estate is locked down," she said. "All documents filed, all loopholes closed." Caleb and Marissa were officially and permanently barred from any future claim. If they challenged it, they'd lose. Every step had been documented, every screenshot cataloged, every post and message dated, time-stamped and notarized in its own quiet way. I thanked her, hung up, and didn't tell anyone. That night, I made a casserole and hosted dinner for 3 women from my book club. We passed around serving spoons and stories, laughing until the candles burned low. No one asked about my past. No one speculated about what I'd given up. They just asked me to bring the dessert next time. After they left, I stood on my porch and listened to the wind moving gently through the pine trees. My wind chimes hummed like they were whispering back to me. and I felt something I hadn't in years. Stillness. Not the anxious stillness of waiting for a knock or a call or the next shoe to drop. The real kind. The kind that settles into your bones and says, "You made it." The next morning, I walked to the mailbox and found a letter from the Community Foundation. The Quiet Exit Fund, named and funded in honor of women like me, had gone live. The first 2 grants had already been issued, one to a woman fleeing elder coercion, the other to a retiree evicted by her own son's girlfriend. I reread the letter twice, then I filed it in a drawer next to my tea bags. That evening, I opened a new journal. The first page said only this: "Peace isn't quiet because it's empty, it's quiet because it's full." A few days later, I received one last message, not from Caleb, not from Marissa, from Daniel's college roommate, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. It said, "Saw what they did. You were right to cut them off. Wish my mom had done the same before my sister drained her dry." I replied with 2 words: "Thank you." Because I wasn't just protecting myself. I had named something that too many of us had swallowed in silence, and I had written the ending they thought they had a right to control. They wanted conflict. I gave them clarity. They wanted a reaction. I gave them a boundary. They wanted to inherit a legacy they hadn't earned. I gave it to women who actually needed it, and I gave myself something too, something they could never fake or stage or steal. My life, on my terms, with no audience and no script. Just a porch, some pine trees, and the kind of silence that holds you, not because you're alone, but because you're finally, completely free.